Hi guys, and welcome to Mom Babes, where every mom is a babe. And if you're like, Christina, I don't feel like a babe, I haven't had a reflective moment alone for months, then this channel is especially for you. None of us has it all together, but we are all creatives. And if you're like, Christina, I'm not a creative, that's a lie, because raising a live human being is the most creative thing that there is. Be sure to subscribe and ding the bell to get notified when I release a new video every Thursday so you never have to miss one. Today, I am going to share with you the story of my 6 consecutive miscarriages. So I am, as a disclaimer, not going to shy away from any of the details. So obviously, if you've lived experience or if this is a sensitive subject for you, you might want to proceed with caution. Why am I sharing my story? So for me, when I was going through in the depths, physically having the miscarriages, I could not get enough of other people's stories because no one that I knew in my family or my friend group had ever gone through one. So I was really, really curious to see if everything that I was experiencing was normal, even though with medical things, they're normal and not normal at the same time. But I craved stories from other women who were going through this experience, binge, could not get enough of them. I was listening to this podcast where the whole podcast was just women telling their miscarriage stories. And while you're having a miscarriage, you're in a lot of pain and you don't have any energy. So you're just lying there a lot. So instead of just, thinking on my own thoughts, I ate up all these other stories, and it really, really, really helped me get through that time. Also, for me, because a lot of women would share their stories a week after they just had their miscarriage or whatnot. I was not in an emotionally stable place to do that, but I made this little promise to myself that one day I would go on the podcast and share my story once I had kids. And that was kind of a big beacon of hope for me to be so excited to share my story because I was going to have kids one day. At the time of my miscarriages, I didn't have any kids, so I was just having miscarriage after miscarriage after miscarriage. So for me, sharing this story is a huge part of my healing journey and part of what I've done to come full circle. My oldest is almost 3, so it has been several years, which is why I can tell this story without breaking down in tears. I did a lot of crying and a lot of therapy when it was happening so that I could share my story with you today. So when I finally was ready to share my story on this podcast, I couldn't find the podcast. I don't know what happened to it. Maybe I just wasn't looking hard enough. But I had all this vested hope and energy in telling my story of hope to other women that this is now the platform where I'm going to share it. So thank you for sitting down and listening with me. This video is specifically going to be just the story. I'm gonna do another video on how I actually got pregnant after all my miscarriages and talk about more of the medical side of that. So probably in the near future, you'll see that video too. So thank you for sitting down with me. Thank you for listening. It is going to be long. I'm gonna go through the whole thing, so take a break as you need to, and let's jump in. Let's start at the beginning. It is 2018, and I am working for a solar company in accounting. And Austin and I have been married upcoming on 2 years. And so now we're thinking, yay, we want to have kids. And so for our 2-year anniversary, we were going to go on a weekend trip to Vegas. And I had just gotten off birth control and was thinking there's no possible way I could get pregnant because I've been on birth control for 2 years at this point, and there's just no way. But what no one told me is that you very much can get pregnant literally the month after you go off birth control, which I will talk about birth control in a second. Today we're just talking about the story. But so I remember thinking, oh, we're going to Vegas, but what if I'm pregnant? I shouldn't be drinking that much, so I'm going to take a pregnancy test. And So I did take one, like literally on the drive up there, we stopped at this scary gas station. I took pregnancy test. It was negative. I'm like, okay, cool, let's go party. And then we had a great weekend. The week after we got back from the Vegas trip, I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, how could I get pregnant this quickly? And I was so excited, and I didn't believe the pregnancy test, and I did what literally every single woman does, which is take at least 50 pregnancy tests. I think Austin was at work. He's a firefighter, so he was gone for multiple days. I didn't want to tell him over text or phone, so I was going to wait till he got home in a couple days. And I think I did, I'm not exaggerating, like 7 or 8 pregnancy tests. We bought a big batch of them at a discount, so I literally had, I don't know why no one else knows about this. I should give you guys the brand, but we bought like thousands of pregnancy tests, like the very basic one that you do, you know, at the OB office for a very like reasonable price. So I had tons of pregnancy tests. So I was like, well, here we go. And I was so excited to tell Austin. We were supposed to go wine tasting, and I, you know, gave him this little present that said, oh, you'll have to be drinking for 2. And I mean, it took him a second to get it, but he eventually got it, and we were really, really excited. And then we came up with cute ways to tell his parents, to tell my parents. I did not think, like, miscarriage was literally the furthest thing from my mind, so I didn't really have any reservations about telling anyone because I never knew anyone who had a miscarriage. None of the women in my family had had miscarriages. I knew that they happened in some far distant place in the universe, but so far that wasn't my world. So I didn't know that you're supposed to wait to tell people. So I told mostly all our family. We didn't tell, we were going to wait till 3 months to tell our friends, I think. But, and I remember trying to get a doctor's appointment, and they were like, you can't come in until, I don't know, it was like 8-10 weeks, like a really, really long time, which I thought was strange, but whatever. So part of this journey you're going to go on with me is I'm going to read some of my journal entries. I am an avid journaler. It's how I cope with life. Working out and journaling, if I'm not doing either one of those things, I'm basically losing my mind. So the cool thing about it is I have Christina in the moment in 2018, what she thought about being pregnant. April 7th, 2018. What a week of work, 65 hours. I never want to do that again. For anyone, this job was like a lot of work at the time. Anyway, my body was acting strange and I was overly exhausted, so I thought I'd take a pregnancy test after my 3-hour nap. Must be nice. It came back positive, which didn't faze me because I thought the test was broken. That can't be right, I thought immediately. Then as I Googled the accuracy of home pregnancy tests, I was like, no way. As it was only 1 month of being off birth control. I always had a feeling that I was fertile, but this is ridiculous. I spent the next few hours Googling everything anyone could possibly ask about pregnancy. Best diet, turns out it's just eating healthy. Best lotions, can you ride roller coasters? What sunscreen can you use? Can I keep my workout routine? Can I keep drinking apple cider vinegar? And on and on. My mind was still spinning as I tried to sleep. This will affect my goal to be debt-free. I was working at the time to pay off my student loans. What about acting? How will I tell Austin? I hope the baby is healthy. It was a very interesting evening. I went from being so exhausted from an insane work week to wide awake as my mind bounced around. So that was my initial thoughts at being pregnant. There we were on our blissful journey towards starting our family, which comes with, all the hopes and dreams and, all the baby things. The week before my first doctor's appointment, which was going to be at 10 weeks, don't even get me started, I was at work, and then after using the restroom, I noticed I had these little, no one has ever described these before, but they're like straw-like little capillary blood vessel things on the tissue, and I was like, that's weird. But then, you go and you Google, like, is spotting normal? Is it not normal during pregnancy? And you get everything in between. So I was like, okay, well, no one's talking about these weird little capillary things. So it's probably nothing because everything is normal and everything is also abnormal. And I was at work, so I didn't have time to dwell on it. So I was like, whatever, I'll just think about this later. And I went home, like I said, Googled it a bunch and just decided we'll see where this goes. And it's too early for them to really do anything anyway. So then I started spotting after intercourse, which again is normal and not normal when you're pregnant. So I was like, okay. And I think either the next morning or the morning after that is when I started actually bleeding. And I was obviously like, okay, well, I guess this is happening. There's no question now. I called off work and I started to pass a lot of blood and tissue. How much blood, do you ask? And this is the part that I was so curious about when I was going through the miscarriage that no one was talking about. Like, no one wanted to get specifics, but you bleed so much. At least I did. It was like every period I had for the past 5 years in a couple days, excessive amounts of blood. Also, I was passing these clots of tissue that, like, imagine a Pop-Tart. So, you know, a Pop-Tart is like kind of flat and rectangular. And then, like, if you were to cut a Pop-Tart in half, like, I would pass clots of tissue that big, and they literally were like a square Pop-Tart tissue. Has anybody else experienced this? So I passed several of those that morning. And I pretty much just spent the whole morning in the shower. I immediately went into business mode and knew that I had to get the RhoGAM shot because I am Rh negative, which they typically give to women when they're pregnant and after you deliver a baby, so that if you do have a baby with a positive blood type, your body doesn't build antibodies and attack your baby. So lucky you, Rh negative mom. But so I knew from like 15 years ago, my mom telling me that I needed this RhoGAM shot. What I didn't know at the time that I wish I did know is that you do have 72 hours to get the shot. And I really, really, really wish I would have waited and given myself at least 24 hours by myself instead of rushing off to the hospital. But that's what we did. And they have this RhoGAM on lock. So you can't get it at like an urgent care. Like, you have to go to a hospital. At least in our area, that's what we had to do at the time. So I don't love the hospital. I totally respect and value the people that work there. Great profession, but I just hate being there. I hate the fluorescent lighting. I hate that everyone's sick. It's just this, like, I just don't love being there. And so already I'm going through processing what's happening with my body. I'm going to this hospital. I hate the hospital. And checking in with the lady who's like, oh, you're so smart. You know, you have to get the RhoGAM shot. And meanwhile, I'm still passing these gigantic clots and tons of blood. So I'm wearing excessive amounts of padding. And they take me in to take some blood, which I understand. You have to confirm my blood type. But they took like 6 full vials of blood, tons of blood. And I'm already bleeding so much, which I was like, what are you thinking? And so I pass out. Thankfully, Austin's there. So I thought I was out for hours, and I was only out for a couple minutes. But then the doctor freaks out because I passed out. They put me in an IV, put me on fluids, push me back, you know, admit me, whatever. And I'm so frustrated because I'm like, I don't even want to be here. This is so unnecessary. Why did you take so much blood? And then they feel that they need to confirm the miscarriage with an ultrasound, a vaginal ultrasound. So the ultrasound technician is like huffing and puffing, you know, I'm bleeding everywhere. I'm like soaking through the towels and the sheets and everything there because I'm miscarrying. And she's probing me with this ultrasound, and she's like huffing and puffing and getting all annoyed and irritated. And then comes back and is like, well, we've confirmed that you've had a miscarriage. And I just want to be like, are you kidding me? Well, duh. That's why I already know, like, that's why I'm here in the first place. And so then I'm like, whatever, let's just, you know, get this done with. Meanwhile, I'm freaking out about the finances because our insurance is good, but I wasn't sure how good. So Austin's on the phone calling the insurance, you know, multiple people just to make sure that this is in fact covered. We should only have to pay like a $250 copay or whatever because we had to get admitted because the doctor screwed up. Anyways, so then I'm like, okay, I'm calming down because that's not as bad. Retrospect, turns out Blue Shield Insurance lied to us and sent us a bill for $2,500. Has that happened to anyone else where you've literally talked to like, and even after we got the bill, we called them, they're like, we don't know why you have the bill. And then eventually they're like, just kidding, you have to pay it now. Has that happened to anyone else where they send you a bill, and then they tell you it's covered, like 5 or 8 multiple people, but then it's not covered. I should have maybe should have pursued it, known how to advocate for it, but I just, couldn't deal with that at the time, didn't know what I was doing. Let me know if that's ever happened to you. So frustrating. So dealing with that, and then the doctor comes in and says, would you like to have a D&C? And for me, I'm so very non-invasive, homeopathic, so they might as well have said, would you like to chop off your arm? And I get that, some people like the D&C because they just want to be done. They just want to process everything. I mean, you know what you can handle. For me, I knew that having a D&C meant risk of future miscarriage. So that was not something that I was willing to do. And so I was like, no, I don't want a D&C. And then they're like, okay, well, we want to send you in an ambulance to another hospital. And what are we doing here? I think the problem too was that it was a new hospital. So don't go to a new hospital. And I don't think they had an OB unit there. Don't do a hospital without an OB unit if you have to get the ROGAM. Not that you should even be admitted if you're getting the ROGAM anyway. But that's part of the problem too, is I never go to the hospital. So they had to check my blood type. What the 6 other vials were for, I have no idea. I don't think they even knew what it was for. So we're there. I'm like, give me that AMA. I'm not going to another hospital. I'm clearly, obviously still miscarrying. I just want to go home. They gave me the shot, signed the AMA, finally got out of there. And so then I just spent the whole day in water. Like, I was taking showers, I was taking warm baths. If you are having a miscarriage, that seemed to be really helpful for me and very relaxing. I think I'm going to put some notes on other things that are helpful too. I know I had like a hot pad because I did start getting some cramping, and that was helpful as opposed to taking painkillers. So I pretty much did that the rest of the day. That first day, I bled from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. I passed probably 15 of those half Pop-Tart square tissues, and I started cramping more in the afternoon, and my cramping was increasing, but it was a little concerning because I was starting to slow down how much I was bleeding finally. And so just so you have a point of reference, I probably was going through like a regular pad, didn't even stand a chance, but like every 20 to 30 minutes I was going through a pad. So that's how much, and it also, most of the time I was in the shower too. So, you're just letting your body get rid of everything. Towards the end of the evening, I did feel like my heart was working really, really hard. And so I was like, okay, my body's just working through this, and I went to sleep. The next day, I woke up really tired. I called off work again, and that morning I did tell my boss what was actually going on. The day before, I just said I was sick, and that morning, I told her. She was super understanding, really amazing. It was hard too because I didn't know how many days this would take. I didn't know how long I had to take off. Thankfully, I had time saved up between sick and vacation and whatever, but they were wonderful, really good at working with me, but I didn't call off for a set amount of days. If you are having a miscarriage, I would say if you can, take at least 2 days off of work. After it was all said and done, ended up missing 5 days of work. I just, was not physically able to work for 5 days for my first miscarriage. And so I would say bare minimum, take 2 days off. Then the next day, day 2, my parents come over, and I remember my dad playing guitar and my mom talking to me, and I slept a lot. I slept probably most of the day, but they were just around to be supportive. And Austin was there too. I didn't have a lot of energy. I was mostly sleeping, and that's when I was laying there wheel spinning and was like, maybe I will listen to this miscarriage podcast. And so that's when I started to, with a voracious appetite, listen to other women's stories, trying to figure out if anything I was going through was extreme or normal or whatever in between. Overall, I'd say day 2 was a very, very heavy period. By then I was soaking through a pad more every hour, hour and a half instead of every 20, 30 minutes. So it did slow down, still bleeding a good amount. But I was just tired and slept most of that day. And I have a journal entry for day 3. So May 18th, 2018. It is day 3. I've been mostly lounging around, sleeping. Symptoms: extreme fatigue, pounding headache. I feel like my heart is working really hard to distribute blood through my body. I've been mostly sleeping and listening to the Miscarriage podcast. Even though this can be a hard time emotionally, I think what I want to remember about this baby is the 2 months of joy and excitement he or she brought. So many fun videos of the pregnancy announcement and smiles, cheers and toasts to the next generation. I am the oldest of 5 in my family and the oldest of 13 cousins. So this was going to be for our family, the first of like the next generation of kids. Even though this baby had a short life, it brought our family immense happiness for the time he or she was with us. That is how I will choose to remember this baby and this pregnancy. My mom and dad and my youngest brother and sister came over to sing silly songs and do impersonations and make me laugh. And Austin went to work. No, that was day 3. So no, day 4 is when they come back. And so same thing, I'm still called off work, having a hard time walking, still just mostly sleeping, still bleeding, not as heavily. And then day 4, Austin went to work. They came over and it's in the afternoon, so I'm starting to cramp a little more aggressively. And I've had terrible menstrual cramps since I was since I first got my period in the 6th grade. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the other video about my medical history, how I got pregnant after so long and all that. But so I always have this conundrum of sometimes when I start cramping, it's going to be fine. Like it'll be a little uncomfortable, it'll go away. And sometimes when I start cramping, it'll be death cramps, like literally shaking, pale, keeled over. Like I look ill. And I can't function or think or do anything. All I can think is I need to take a searing hot bath. I've literally laid on like hot cement, like summer 100 degrees hot cement, just like trying to like relax my muscles and ease the pain, just to give you an idea of how intense. I'm not exaggerating. Like you think I'm exaggerating. I'm literally not exaggerating. So I was like, well, do I take painkillers or maybe this won't be so bad? It keeps getting worse and worse. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to take painkillers. But you know that thing when you take painkillers, but it's like belated and the pain is so intense, the painkiller like can't catch up. And so there I am in immense pain. Now that I've been through labor twice, the cramps I was feeling were labor cramps, and they were what I feel at about 4 to 5 centimeters. So pretty intense. And basically my body was passing the rest of the fetus. And so I was on the floor, like just moaning and rolling around because painkillers weren't doing anything. And then I called Austin, was like, I want to go to the hospital. Which I never want to go to the hospital, so that tells you. And then shortly after that, I passed the fetus, and it was very obviously a fetus, about 3 inches long. And so I determined that I was actually further along than I thought I was. I'm pretty sure I was in the early 2nd trimester or, at the end of the 1st, like just somewhere in there. Whereas originally I thought I was closer to 10 weeks. So that was interesting. Anyway, Austin came home, which he never does. But by the time he got home, I'd passed everything and I just wanted to go to bed. So it was super sweet. He just hugged me, and Mom and Dad and the siblings went home. And at this point, I guess I still wasn't ready to emotionally process everything. I was still in business mode. Like, okay, we need to physically take care of everything. And I think it was the weekend, so I wasn't going back to work yet. Still kind of recovering. But yeah, not ready to really delve into anything. And I think I watched like terrible, cheesy TV or something to like just think about anything that wasn't real life. And there's the thing too where you're like, okay, well, who am I going to tell about this? Who am I going to share? And so for me, I actually felt more comfortable telling my friends that didn't have kids versus my friends who did. Mostly because I didn't want my friends who, were in the process of building their families and getting pregnant to edit themselves. I didn't want them to feel like, oh, I'm pregnant, I'm so excited. Or, oh, my kid did this, I'm so excited, I want to talk about it. I didn't want them to feel like they couldn't because of what I went through. So I just didn't tell them. And so that, they could be authentically themselves and experience things, like I said, without editing themselves because they feel guilty or whatever. So the first friend I told was my friend Christine, which Christine, if you're watching this, mwah. Christine and I have been best friends since we were 2 years old. We used to joke, because I'm Christina, she's Christine, that we were twins. We literally, guys, look nothing alike, but our names sound similar. And you know, that's what you come up with when you're 4 or 5 or whenever. But my dad has darker coloring, so she'd say she looks like my dad. I'd say I look like my mom. Anyways, so she, and I like was nervous because I didn't know how people would react or even how I wanted people to react, but she was very sweet and very understanding, and I don't know, didn't try to like give advice or anything, was just there for me. So that was really helpful. And then I did like pick select friends that I told as time went on, you know, as I felt right. Obviously my family knew because I told them all I was pregnant. Then as I did allow myself to emotionally process, I started bawling pretty much every Sunday in church. I think during worship I was like crying hysterically almost every Sunday. And, you know, as it hit me, I would allow myself to feel and process. But God was so good. I remember random strangers in church, like coming up to me and saying things like God sees you, God delights in you, he hasn't forgotten about you, like often during this time, like strangers. And so I'm obviously really grateful for those people, but it's also like, you know, God was telling me that like, I see you, you're not alone. That was really meaningful and very helpful for me. But it was still like, it wasn't like our whole life was overshadowed by the sadness. Obviously there was a lot of grief, but it was a really good summer and we had a lot of fun. Austin and I are naturally very active, fun-loving people, and so we really, really leaned into that. And I think it helped us through that time. Obviously, we're going through this immense struggle. It's helping us in our marriage, but I wasn't like wallowing in a hole, you know, not living life because I was so sad about what happened. That's also just not my personality either. No, like, I mean, if you need to wallow in a hole, then wallow in a hole. But for me, I found it was really helpful to do stuff. I'll read what I wrote. I was sad. I cried almost every Sunday in church. It was a long, arduous season with a lot of loss and grieving, strangely juxtaposed with really good times, ? But I had a good support system and I let myself feel things as they came. It didn't overwhelm my life. I still had a lot of fun with Austin, able to compartmentalize, really did feel that I was going to have kids. And I remember that being like this feeling like I'm going to have kids someday, which is so crazy because I do now. Like amazing, absolutely amazing. That this was just one little hiccup. Well, not just one, but we'll get to that. We had a great summer. We truly did. Golfing, girls' nights, Twilight Imperium nerdy board game for 8 hours, 4th of July party, date nights, wineries, pool parties, movie nights. So it was a really good time. And we decided that we were ready to try again in August. And so I actually got pregnant right away. And then this miscarriage was extremely different from the first one, because it was more like a heavy period. So my first miscarriage was very different from the following 5 because that was the one where I was the furthest progressed, whereas the next 5 were in the early-ish first trimester. So at that time, I saw a periodontologist who ran a bunch of blood tests, told me I was normal and prescribed me progesterone. I got a positive pregnancy test August 2018. I was still very hopeful and excited because what is the alternative? And I knew the power of stress on your body. So I was, every single time I got pregnant, I allowed myself to be excited and to be hopeful and to be happy, because I feel like if you have all this negative talk, self-talk, and all this negative energy, like that, it's not going to help. I had a miscarriage 11 days later. This was a very different experience physically from the first, which was closer to the end of the first trimester. The second one was more of a heavy period, and I would not have known it was a miscarriage except that I was taking pregnancy tests often like a crazy person. I like, so after I had that miscarriage, like every single month, like if I didn't get my period like right on time, I was taking pregnancy tests. And even if I did get my period, I took a pregnancy test to see if it was a miscarriage or, you know what I mean? Even though we were being very careful, I was just like hyper about the pregnancy tests. The second one was more of a heavy period and would not have even known it was a miscarriage, except that I was taking pregnancy tests often. This time, as soon as Austin came home, I started crying. So he talked with me, canceled our plans, and had a stay-in weekend. I didn't have time to have a cute way to tell everyone we were pregnant. Instead, the news was I had another miscarriage. So after that, we took more time because that was August. So April, so 9 months. So I said, let's, give my body time to kind of recover from this. So number 3, early April 2019, I was fatigued, tender breasts, late for my period, pregnant again, taking progesterone. So I would start taking the progesterone suppositories pretty much as soon as I knew I was pregnant. I'm still hopeful. I started spotting a few weeks later. It doesn't necessarily mean miscarriage, but I had a gut feeling. The next day, my pregnancy symptoms were gone. Never thought I'd miss nausea, but I did. Mostly I was annoyed about having to get the RhoGAM shot again and concerned with the logistics as I was performing in a Shakespeare show, so I wasn't sure how my energy levels would be. Even early miscarriages can bring a lot of fatigue. I stayed home from Easter, which is like crazy because I love my family and I love holidays, but it was just too much that year. So my mom came and spent the day watching movies with me. It's a very non-traditional Easter. This is when it started to get really hard emotionally. 1 miscarriage could be a one-off, 2 is not ideal, but 3 starts to sound like there's an underlying problem. And so I'll read you the journal from this time. April 27th, 2019. I am experiencing the part of grief that hits you randomly. Yesterday, I was numb, doing nothing but watching some of my favorite childhood shows, probably Lizzie McGuire. Today, while driving to Hobby Lobby, I just started to sob thinking about my dream last night. In my dream, Austin and I had a boy about 4 or 5 and a girl baby whose name was Eleanor, one of the characters in the play I'm rehearsing. We were doing Sense and Sensibility, so Eleanor was my sister in the play. And I taking care of her? Walking, feeding, soothing when she cried. It was so realistic. I specifically remember thinking in my dream, we have 2 healthy kids. What was I so worried about? You guys, which is crazy because now I do, you know what I mean, have 2 healthy kids. And I wrote this journal, was it 2023, 4 years ago? This is crazy. And anyways, I forgot about this dream until my drive to Hobby Lobby, and now I can't stop crying in the parking lot. Obviously at this time, nothing has been realized. I don't think I can do this again. I feel so wrecked from this whole experience. I want a baby so desperately. It's hard to admit. I know I have a future with children, but it doesn't make the pain of this 3rd miscarriage any less awful. This one really, underlined, hit me hard. I feel like I am not the same. Maybe I will never be the same. I feel I've lost 3 pieces of myself that I can never get back. 3 pieces of Austin and I, and it's devastating. I think I may need to go to counseling. I have hit a true low, sitting here bawling in the Hobby Lobby parking lot, so overcome with grief that I can't even go into the store or stop crying. Is this rock bottom? I do remember one of the days after the 3rd miscarriage, I was sitting on the floor in the kitchen up against the cabinet. There's a cabinet and the sink's behind me. And I just said, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't bring you into this world. I'm sorry I couldn't make this happen. And I just felt like he said, it's okay, Mom. And obviously I started bawling on the kitchen floor because that's really normal. But it was a good release as well. Even at that point, Austin and I still want to have kids. We know that kids are for us. And so we were we tried waiting a long time. Let's try to get pregnant right away. And so we got pregnant the very next month. Number 4, I figured last time we waited several months, maybe try right away. So we did. We got pregnant, miscarried at 4 weeks. And so that became anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks kind of became the norm. May 19th of 2019, so a year later now. I had a doctor's appointment with a midwife who ran a lot of tests and said there isn't much more they can do without sending me to a fertility specialist. And the fertility specialist will only do very invasive surgeries that may or may not help. I have come to the resolution that there is not much doctors can really do to help me, and not very much I can even do to help myself. Now that I am at peace with this thought, I can strangely relax and rest in the Lord, which sometimes I did and sometimes I didn't. The thing I did learn is that at 7 to 8 weeks is when the placenta attaches, and so this is the issue I continue having. Interesting. Austin has been patient with me through this whole process. I love spending so much time with him and playing Gloomhaven, blah, 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 blah. Flowers. I go on to gush about how awesome Austin has been through everything. And it was truly amazing to have such a supportive person. He was totally a rock for me during that time. And like I said, still leaning into enjoying life, having fun, not letting this stop us from enjoying our marriage or each other, and not letting it become so much of an obstacle that we couldn't live. And that was really helpful. After that, I decided to quit my high stress job of, 50, 60 hours a week. If you work a job like that, you understand how intense that is. I thought, this isn't good for my body. I need to take a break. I need to rest. So I did. I quit my job. And thankfully we had savings and I'd planned for that. So I took a few months off just to kind of rest and perform in shows and do something I love, and pretty much just mostly like decompress from a stressful work situation, which was probably helpful. Miscarriage number 5 was then the May, June, July. So again, 2 months later. So July 11th, 2019. On my run today, I was nearing the end of the run as I go on a 2-mile loop around the block. And it is a more difficult portion because it starts to incline uphill. And as I struggled, I looked to my right and then to my left, and I imagined angels running beside me in encouragement, and I smiled. Then as I turned to glance at the golden sun about to set behind me, I imagined 100 more, all jogging at my speed, in pace with me. I am not alone. A cloud of witnesses. Can the witnesses be that close? I went to my OB appointment to get a referral to a reproductive specialist. My 5th miscarriage happened despite the suppository progesterone I was taking on our trip to South Dakota July 2nd. I was bleeding pretty bad on the 3rd at the rodeo while the fireworks were going off. I normally don't like to miss fireworks, but a bathroom was necessary. I went to my therapist appointment today. It was quite anticlimactic. He said I seemed to be processing everything well. You're very balanced, he said. And although I've always prided myself on being balanced, I thought I needed more therapy. And he said I needed time to grieve all the loss. He didn't even think I needed a second appointment unless I wanted one. You should maybe give your body a break and find a support group of women who have experienced the same thing. That's the easiest thing to do in the world. On the acting side, because we talked about acting too, he recommended the book, The War of Art. I made another appointment for 6 weeks later, but I ended up going. So this is when things got to get a little more emotional on a deeper level. So for me, I went to school for theater, graduated, went to LA for 5 years, and did projects, whatever, but essentially I felt like I super failed at that. So I was like, well, I suck and I failed at acting. That didn't work out. And then here I am as a mom, the one thing you're supposed to be able to do as a woman, and I failed at that. And so I was just feeling generally like a failure, and that was really hard to process through. Because I couldn't have a baby and I felt the need to create something, I threw myself into writing a script. And so I've always journaled. Obviously I'm reading my journals since I was in high school, so I've been doing that for years, but I had never written creatively before. And so I joined a writing group and I wrote a script. And it was awful because it was my first one, and your first one should be awful. But it was really wonderful too, because it was in my frustration to not be able to create a person, I could at least create something and send it out into the world. And so if you are going through a miscarriage and you want a distraction, this might be a good time to throw yourself into something you've never tried before, or something that just sounds fun, that doesn't sound like work, like, cooking or gardening or anything that's just different and new. I think can be very therapeutic. Nurturing something else, maybe, I don't know, getting a pet. I'm not a big animal person, but if you love pets, that might be a good idea. Just to put your nurturing efforts elsewhere, I found to be really constructive. One of my quotes, I can finish a script, albeit a bad script, but it's a start. I think that's funny. So for number 6, we decided to wait 3 months longer again. And I did not work during that whole time. And I did get a part-time job, so I was ready to go back to work. I felt like I'd really rested and recovered physically. But I knew I didn't want to do the 50, 60 hours again. So I went back to work for a logistics company part-time. So this is part of the creative transition I was going through at the time, after the 5th. At church, I surrendered Christina the actress. I liked her. She is capable and glamorous and interesting and fun. But if I'm being honest, I am lately more in tune with Christina the writer. I feel writing is my calling for the moment, even though I don't know what I'm doing. I feel sad and subdued and thoughtful and longing to be alone and introspective, more like a brooding writer than a lively actress. And then Austin and I went camping. And on the camping trip is where the 6th one happened. Fishing, cooking, campfires. The downside of the trip was that I started spotting. I was so optimistic about this pregnancy, the 6th one, and I'm so disappointed. I can tell Austin is disappointed as well. The spotting started small as always, and even though I keep my optimism and my peace in the situation, more and more blood follows, redder and redder. The loss of an innocent life. And there seems to be nothing myself or Austin or the doctors can do about it. It triggers a lot of feelings. I stepped away from acting to start a family with Austin. The marriage portion has been amazing, and yet we cannot complete our goal of having children. And so I grow antsy. Instead of living in this hellhole of waiting, maybe I should go back to acting or writing. Maybe writing is the key. I feel disillusioned. Not only has my career fizzled to be rather pathetic, but I can't even establish my domestic self. All caps. This was not supposed to be my story. This was not supposed to be my battle! Exclamation point. I don't want this to meld into my identity. It's a very deep and painful thing to mourn the loss that will never be. Heroin addicts can have babies, yet my body rejects them. So what's the point of being healthy? No offense to heroin addicts. I was just really angry. I would be lying if I said I wasn't frustrated with God. I always will accept his sovereignty and his will, but I'm not going to apologize for feeling sad and angry. 6 children. The loss of 6 children. Who can fathom such a thing? My Instagram tangent is mostly for myself. I rarely go on, and when I do, it is to mostly look at my own posts, my memories. I will post a cute pic of our tent site from the trip this weekend, and no one will know, except Austin, that I am currently cramping from this miscarriage. But so what? Like I said, my Instagram is for myself only. I'm so I'm so hurting during that time. October 24th, 2019. I'm just going to keep reading. I went to the OB to get a RhoGAM shot, stupid shot. And she was curious to know how I was doing, like really. It was sweet. She hugged me and wanted to know how things were going with the specialist. She actually listened to me. After I told her that the specialist basically proclaimed Austin and I healthy with no real fertility, miscarriage problems, she was confused and taken aback. Probably because she could see my chart and was like, dude, this girl's like got issues. I said it was frustrating not to know what the problem was. Clearly there was a problem. She said she was there for me and if I need anything. Mostly I'm processing this miscarriage. I'm angry. I guess a person can handle 5 miscarriages, but 6? That's reason for outrage. I guess I've already gone through the shock, denial, sadness phases, and now I'm just pissed. I've been pregnant this year more than I've been not pregnant. And for what? So much wasted energy. It makes me sick and mad. When the OB did the ultrasound, she said all the tissue had passed the next day. I started spotting Sunday, and by Wednesday, I passed everything. My body is ridiculous. That is so fast, like a miscarriaging machine. Terrible. Maybe I'm sensitized and should see. Sensitized meaning the RhoGAM is supposed to keep you from getting sensitized so your body doesn't attack your babies. But I was worried maybe I'm sensitized and should see if I should get the RhoGAM earlier in the pregnancy. Who knows? And now I have to tell people about another miscarriage. Blah, 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 blah. So that was where I was at after miscarriage number 6. So this was kind of a turning point for Austin and I. I mean, after 6 miscarriages, most people would say that's an excessive amount. And so we were at the definition of insanity and trying the same thing over and over, and it wasn't working. So I'm going to do another video because it's a lot of information on what I did differently for the 7th pregnancy. But took more time. So that was October, the 6th one. And so then Austin and I were like, we'll try again in 3 months. But it was just it was finally, I mean, it had been a burden, but it was becoming a lot and kind of just felt futile to just try again, even though I was on progesterone and that wasn't helping. So we did it, and then they're like, we can do in vitro. But I'm like, for us, that's not really helpful because we have no problem getting pregnant. I literally would get pregnant immediately. It's more maintaining the baby. So to spend all this money on in vitro didn't make sense. And so what we decided was if this 7th pregnancy didn't go full term, then we would look at surrogacy because we still wanted to have our genetics. But clearly my body was incapable of carrying the baby. So someone else could. And it wasn't what we super wanted to do, but you know, at this point we still really wanted kids. And so that's what we were thinking of doing. But then 10 months later, baby Daxon Fitzallen was born. And so it's cool that he was the 7th pregnancy, because 7 is the number of completion, biblically. And so that was really special, really magical. I still, so he's going to be 3 soon, and I still am amazed that we have 2 healthy boys after especially like doing a video like this where I'm kind of reliving it all and what it was really like to be in that place. Man, it's so hard. We decided that if this 7th pregnancy didn't go full term, we would go to Japan in 2020, which, thank God. Can you imagine, like going through another, like the 7th miscarriage, like being so sad, and then it being 2020 and you like want to take this trip to Japan and no one is traveling anywhere? Anyways, God is so good because 2020 was actually an amazing year to be pregnant because there was nowhere to go anyway. So I could sleep like 12 hours a day. And yeah, that was a thank you. One of these days we still do want to go to Japan though. So why did I make this video? Obviously I wanted to share my story. This is partly for me and my healing process and reflecting on what God has done in my life. If you are having a miscarriage, I just really, first of all, I just want to send you a hug. It's awful. It's miserable. There's nothing that anyone can say, but just know that you aren't alone. Know that this is not your fault, that you don't have to carry any extra guilt like you caused this somehow. Or I would stress so much over like, oh, maybe I worked out too much this time, or maybe this or maybe that. And so much of the pregnancy is either going to go or not going to go, totally separate of what, is going on with you. And so don't blame yourself. Yes, allow yourself to be angry, allow yourself to be sad, allow yourself to process. But I do, at the risk of making you upset, because I hate it when you're going through something difficult, and I hated it. I really, really, really did. I was hopeful, but in the midst of going through that, like, it's so painful to want things. And so I'm very, very sensitive to opening up yourself, to trying again, or to actually wanting a family. And it may not even be a family. It may be a job, a dream, a house, or whatever that you want. Wanting something is super painful because it opens yourself up to disappointment, and it can be absolutely damaging. But if you do want kids, don't give up. As long as it takes. If you need to step away from it for a second, step away. But don't give up, because they are so worth it. If no one has told you yet today, you are doing a good job. Thank you so much for listening to my long-winded story. Hopefully it made you feel like you have someone else on this journey with you. And if you have any questions, I'm not, I've had a lot of miscarriages, but I'm not like a medical professional or anything. If you have any questions about my story, I'm a pretty open book, or any other thoughts. Obviously, I want this to be, depending on also what you feel comfortable sharing on the internet. It's a very sensitive subject. Not everyone is like me, broadcasting the details of their whole story. But if you do feel comfortable asking, I am right there with you. I'm more than willing to jump in and have that conversation. Thanks guys for watching Mom Babes, and I'll catch you next time.